como eu sou, como eu sou, como eu sou, como eu sou. Sei que falta.
Yo, 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 it is another Tuesday, therefore another episode of The Boyd. What is up? Welcome back. I can't believe another Tuesday has come through so quickly. It's crazy how quick time flies. All right, so we've got the track called Calm Calm by Sep Rock. Let me turn this down a little bit. Let it play out. Sep Rock Beats. Oh, I said I was going to have my different computer running the show this week, but Hofstadter's Law, remember Hofstadter's Law, that everything will take longer than you expect, even when taking into account Hofstadter's Law. So that is one of those paradoxical self-referencing laws. It's not a real law, it's not like a physics law or something. Remember, it's just like Murphy's Law or that kind of thing. All right, so welcome. We've got one person, very special person, on the show with us tonight. What is up? And so we also have our little bit of calm left. Yes, 6 more seconds of that. So, yeah, tonight, what are we talking about? The title of the show is Help Yourself. I guess that could be taken in a couple different ways. I mean, it's got a sort of double entendre, right? So help yourself, like go ahead and grab whatever it is, dozo, please have at it, or go help yourself, right? So this is sort of talk. I mean, I sort of want to use a jump off point of self-help, this phenomenon of self-help. And it's not a new thing. I mean, I think most people know what I'm talking about. It's like I think it's coming in a lot of different ways, a lot of different mediums. For instance, you have self-help through like you get these inspirational memes, people spreading around inspirational memes like never give up or some, I don't know, some other crap like like just always stay positive or things like that. I don't even know. I'm not really good with that type of stuff because sometimes I feel like those things are like sugar pills or something like that. Sometimes it's just a little bit of superficial sweetness that it's almost bordering on a weird term that I've heard recently a few times. It almost borders on toxic positivity. Toxic positivity being something where, I mean, it sounds sort of oxymoronic, toxic positivity, but it's a situation where I believe, anyway, when we could look up the definition of it, but I'll give you my off the cuff definition is basically someone who is willing to avoid. See, I don't know. It's sort of, who do you trust to get this definition from? It's sort of a weird word. I don't even know if it's necessarily a real word yet, quote unquote real, whatever that means. But toxic positivity, like you are negating the reality of a situation in order to focus on just the positive. Like, for instance, let's say you're about to get like evicted from your house. I guess toxic positivity would just be, focusing on the fact that you, in this very moment, you are not yet evicted, or something like that, as opposed to trying to come up with a solution and sort of I don't know. Otherwise, dealing with the issue. I mean, I think there's some situations where you probably run into someone where, you're not necessarily trying to be a downer on a situation or something, just trying to take a negative outlook on purpose. But sometimes shit's negative. Sometimes negative things happen that aren't very good, right? So it doesn't mean. I think one of the things that we get confused with, because a lot of times people are either 0 or 100. There's like the gradients in between. They don't want to deal with the 50 shades of gray. They want to deal with white and charcoal, and like that's it. And that is just, it's too, there's too much nuance. There's too much stuff. So for instance, you could focus on the positive aspect of something for a moment, but then also looking at the reality of the situation, right? I mean, that's just as important. And so sometimes the reality is a negative reality that does not fit into your ideal vision. So now what? Right? So it doesn't mean you. I think the big point is not to dwell on the negative aspect of whatever's happening. Um, and that if you can at least sort of move on from that, then you can. I wonder if I noticed something looked really weird on the video. Anyway, if you guys let me know, give me some feedback if something's going on in the video. If you, it just seemed like they might have paused or got frozen. Sometimes my network here is no good. Anyway, so self-help. It's a sort of oxymoronic situation, right? Self-help. If you could help yourself, wouldn't you already do it? So when you are helping yourself with a book, really you're helping yourself with someone else. Whoever wrote that book is helping you, right? So it's sort of, it's a catch-22 in a way. So you're not really by yourself helping yourself only, or excuse me, you yourself are not the only component. So I guess the main thing. I mean, there was a George Carlin joke about self-help that might sum it up, this sort of oxymoron, a little bit better. Let's see if I can find that joke. What did he say? He said, George Carlin, very, very astute individual, great comedian. Let's see. All right. If you're looking for self-help, why would you read a book written by somebody else? That's not self-help. That's help. There's no such thing as self-help. If you did it yourself, you didn't need help. And I think that's something that we should pause on for a second, because I think on one hand, like, it really makes you wonder, what is, when you say self-help, if someone else is writing the book that you're leaning on to help yourself, is it what is the actual component of self-help? Is it that you are maybe that you're taking the leadership of this help, as opposed to going to a guru and having the guru tell you? I mean, that's sort of what the book is. So I don't know, maybe self-help is like self-study. So you're not working on someone else's timeline, maybe. So it's not literally self-help as in yourself in a vacuum. I don't know. Tell me what you guys think. What is your opinion about self-help stuff? We got one person in this entire earth of billions of people that are tuned in on YouTube. One person, let us know what is up. Also, we got some Facebook folks. Well, one person now on Facebook. By the way, Facebook, it is very glitchy. My feed on Facebook's pretty glitchy. So sometimes I don't really get to see comments or things like that. There is a YouTube link in the description if you want to jump over to the YouTube side of things. Because if you're leaving a comment about self-help or anything else on YouTube, on Facebook, I cannot see it. And in fact, I'm not getting any updates from Facebook. So jump onto the YouTube channel and get onto the live chat and tell me what you think. Have you used quote unquote self-help yourself? What are your thoughts on it? Why? And here's the other thing too. It's not an entirely new phenomenon. So I mentioned that previously, that is actually back in like the 1800s. Someone wrote a book about something Smile. What's his name? Sam Smiles or something. I don't remember the guy's name. But there was actually a book called Self-Help back in the 1850s, and it gave you some pointers like never say die and stuff like that, which I guess that's a way of helping yourself. Don't say die. And I think he actually came up with the moniker or something that, or not the moniker, the phrase about heaven helping those who help themselves or something like that. Supposedly it's in the Bible too. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it is. Superfan Chris is here. What is up, sir? Welcome back to the show for another week and another round. Looks like we have another person joined us on YouTube. What is up? Hopefully you will jump in and let us know what is happening. So self-help, you see there's a whole, so back in the 1850s, there's actually a book called Self-Help. So it makes you start to wonder, why is it that makes you wonder if people needed the self-help prior to that, and what did they get? What was it? I guess the whole motivation, or prior to quote unquote self-help, you had to always go to someone directly. Like when you look at self-help, it's basically advice, right? Most of the things, at least if you're looking at a book or a video or some kind of self-help product, there's usually an item, a thing, a problem, something that they're trying to address, something specific. So, I guess really the prior to quote unquote self-help, you would have to find the guru in that thing, or a mensch or whatever in that particular field. Let's say you have a relationship problem, or you're having interpersonal problems or similar, right? Or maybe you're not making any money, or maybe I don't know what other stuff. You keep getting it beat up by bullies or something. Then you would go to someone who you thought was a master, or at least somewhat well versed in that discipline, art, issue, problem, whatever. And then you sought them out and they would help you. So I guess really when we start talking about self-help, it's really something where you can guide yourself through this help without someone hands-on putting you or taking you through this. And there are some pros and cons to that. As you can imagine, if you could help yourself, then you would already be able to do that. And so the fact that you are getting help from someone else sort of lends itself to the notion that you may need help in order to be helped, and including help understanding the self-help. So, right. So if you get, let's say you get a self-help book or a video and you miss the point, who's going to tell you? Who's there to tell you about that? I hear about this kind of situation. It reminds me, this idea of missing the point. It reminds me of people going through, and including myself, people going through relationship struggles. I noticed that that either in the stories I hear from other people, or even through my own experience, that let's say I'm going through a breakup, or not even a breakup, just like maybe the preceding, the pre-breakup period, where maybe there's a sense that something's wrong. that there's a drifting away, that there's a the things just aren't the same as they used to be. So usually I believe, right, that if this happens, you either have both parties both drifting away, or you have one of the parties drifting away and the others trying to keep it together. If they're both drifting away, then they both can probably have a pretty amicable breakup, and still be friends and all that kind of stuff. They both realize, hey, it's just not the right thing. And you know, it's okay. And then you just part ways, right? And you learn some stuff. Hopefully you're introspective enough to learn some lessons and whatever else, and etc. Because, and you should, right? You should seek to learn a lesson in that relationship, because you only have so much time on this earth, right? So you really should, anytime you spend time doing something that you could have done something else with, right? There's an opportunity cost. I feel like you should maximize the effect of it, right? So if you go to, well, I mean, to some degree, I mean, maximize to the point where it doesn't devalue something else. But like, I mean, if you go to, if you're going to go, I don't know, to a lake for vacation, then go to the freaking lake and like go do lake shit all day and like hardcore. Don't go to the lake and then leave to go to the city. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that, right? I mean, maybe if that's part of your agenda or whatever's clever, but maximize the experience. I mean, surely there's something you could learn. Why did you get with this person if it wasn't working out? Or if you found that it wasn't going to work out, or what was it that helped you understand that, etc. Whatever. But if there's one person that it's the relationship's breaking up and the other person is trying to hold on to it, what I've seen happen a lot of times is that, because in their hurt of being, in knowing the inevitable, right, in their pain, etc., they will want to inflict that pain back upon the other, right? So on one hand, they have this duality inside, this fighting duality. On one hand, they are upset and hurt and all of those things, that there's an inevitable breakup. They feel betrayed, whatever else. It doesn't even have to be a real betrayal. The fact that this other person does not want to be with them anymore and they want to be with that other person, there's an imbalance. There's a betrayal there, in their mind, I think. And so instead of full on trying to do what they can to make sure that they are able to hold on to and really win over, in essence, keep winning over this person. Instead of doing that, instead of trying to maximize that whatever went wrong in the relationship, instead of trying to fix that or those kinds of things, they focus on trying to guilt the other person, or saying snide remarks that are like, aha, well, you don't like me anyway, so what does it matter, and da da da, or just different things. I mean, what are just a lot of negativity or other things that aren't necessarily something that the other person is looking for in the relationship anyway. And they'll double down on those things and lash out in that way. And as if the other person is supposed to, I guess, get guilted into turning around and feeling different, or that because, oh, you can see that the other person is upset, then therefore I should change my feelings. Look at what you're doing. You're making this person upset by not having feelings for them. So you better have feelings now, because look how upset they are, and look what kind of snide remarks or what kind of behavior you're getting from this. So you better stop. Right. And of course that stuff never works. It always backfires because of course you're pushing that person further away. Right. But in the emotional state and all of those things, um, they miss the point. Right. So you could be, let's say you're the person in the relationship that doesn't feel it anymore. You could be giving hints and even if you try, and here's the other part, wouldn't it be great if someone would just simply give you the feedback that you needed? Right? Feedback is a gift. You can't insist upon a gift. But sometimes you can talk and try to, well, here's the other thing. Sometimes you can't insist on a gift, but sometimes you can ask for a gift, like hey, I really could use some feedback right now because I need to know some things. So, and then ask the question and talk about it, right? Um, but that doesn't end up happening. And a lot of times, what I see in other people's relationships and my own, again, it's not just me. Um, I see this from the outside perspective looking in, that you get people that really, like I said, they double down on expressing their pain and inflicting some level of punishment on the other person. And of course, that action drives the other person even further into their decision that they don't want to be around this anymore. And it's an inevitability. It's almost like a catch-22 to where what in their pain for loss, they will push them away even more because of their behavior. Instead of trying to look away from their own ego and taking things personal, and instead looking at things objectively. So I don't know. I think that exemplifies why self-help is a little dangerous, is because you could be in the midst of a very intimate relationship with things blatantly, sometimes explicitly told to you, to your face, and you may miss the point. The point might right over your head, right? Um, I've seen, like, I know some folks. I know a guy that has a girl that gained a bunch of weight and whatever, and they were still together. They're still together and whatever, all that stuff. And there's it's something that's it's something that strained their relationship, but it wasn't something that ultimately broke them apart or anything like that. And the girlfriend, or I can't remember if his wife or his girlfriend at the time, um, would would make these remarks like, "Oh, I better lose weight, or else you're going to leave me," etc., etc. And then and of course that is definitely an important component to a relationship, but the other part of the relationship that might be more important to the guy, that turns out this guy's more focused on something else. There's like not just the personality of who he's with, but who they are as a person. Um, that kind of thing. It's sort of, I don't know how to explain it, and I don't want to get into the whole long description that he gave. But at the end of the day, the point was, she was missing the point, right? Just missing the point of what was important in the relationship. So there was a lot of assumptions that it was all physical, that it was that the prime issue was a physical issue, and it turns out that there was more to it than that, right? But she just made an assumption and ran with it, and so she just missed the point altogether. And so that's one of the things with self-help that becomes a little bit a little bit tricky because some of the concepts can be sort of deep. And if you don't really get it, then there's no one there to correct your assertion or your, sometimes if you are trying to ensure that you understand something, you might try to summarize something or recount something. If you're not able to recount what you just read or experienced in a meaningful way that actually makes sense to what that guidance is supposed to give you, then then what good is it, right? What good is it? It might as well be written in a different language, I guess, right? All right, so let's see what we got. So far we've got Superfan Chris on board. We've got 4 folks on YouTube. What is up, everybody on YouTube? Tell me, what do you think about self-help and this whole thing that's going on with self-help? I think part of that, it points to this need or this feeling of anxiety, or there must be something that's missing, right? People are seeking to better themselves and they can't go. Why aren't they going to some guru? Well, some people are, I guess. Who even is that? that guru? There's the crazy thing about it is that there are estimates that the self-help industry is between 9 and 11 billion, maybe up to 13 billion supposedly, or projected out to be. And it makes you wonder, if it's this big of an industry, what is the incentive for any of the self-help people to actually make self-help material or resources that actually helps? What's their incentive? It's just like, what's the incentive for a doctor to cure you? If you got to show up every 2 weeks or something to get more pills, why should they ever cure you? You would think about the Hippocratic Oath, and I don't know, that people would intrinsically just be doctors to save people, and that exists. But you have to also think about the idea that in a profit-driven world, what is the incentive for problems to be solved? If a problem can be exploited to make money and profit, what is the incentive for that problem to ever actually be solved? I don't know. So why don't you guys tell me? Superfan Chris says, what the need for self-help will never go away. Everyone is seeking fulfillment and answers to why they're going through whatever they may be going through. Unfortunately, there are gurus who take advantage of people and regurgitate the same information over and over again. No kidding. No kidding. Thank you, by the way, Superfan Chris. By the way, for the 4 folks or 3 other folks that aren't Superfan Chris, this includes Superfan Chris, but he has already told me that he prefers to use a live chat. But if you want to Skype, let's say you want to jump on the show and give your opinion, you can actually call the Skype or click on the Skype link and chat that way, or you can get on Skype and I'll plug you into the show. Superfan Michael W., what is up? We need people that care more about people than profits. Well, now there are people who care about people more than profits. However, how do you get in front of them? What's distribution look like? You know what I mean? It's like this. It's like there's plenty of like really hot artists that are really amazing and great songwriters and talented. But without distribution, how would you ever know about them? Right. So don't let my message of or at least critique of self-help and self-help industry imply that these people don't exist. But here's the other thing. Let me jump on something. And I, by the way, I talk about people, about the dangers of self-help, being that one of the dangers anyway, being that the self-help can be misinterpreted. The fact that you needed to seek the help in the first place lends itself to this idea that you may need help, even in understanding the help that you're getting, right? So, um, but here's, and I'm saying, what I'm getting at is I'm not immune to misunderstanding what it is, right? I'm not immune to that. So that's why I have the show. That's why I try to get you guys to dump comments and get on Skype or do the live feed thing. And by the way, we got 2 people on Facebook. If you have an opinion about self-help and some other stuff like that, jump on to YouTube. There's a YouTube link on the description, and it's a little easier, less glitchy. Facebook, for whatever reason, on my computer is super glitchy, and it does not record your comments in real time very well. But YouTube does. So jump on YouTube and join the conversation. So Superfan Chris said something that I think is an interesting point. He said the need for self-help will never go away. Everyone is seeking fulfillment and answers to why they are going through whatever they may be going through. And one of even before, see, this is how Western civilization tries to sort of say that they did things first. Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, right? I'm probably butchering the name, which is, I don't care. Lao Tzu, right? He wrote some that the Tao thousands of years ago, so meant a long time before 1850s, right? And this in of itself is a self-help book, really, right? The Tao is a guidebook on how to maneuver through life. And one of the things that's in there, I haven't actually read the whole thing, but one of the lines that's in there is that the master does not seek fulfillment. And because those who seek fulfillment can be subject to manipulation. And that's what we see, the gurus that we're talking about, taking advantage, manipulating people to get these profits, right? Because people need help, and some people are willing to pay a great deal to get that help. And that's the thing, is they're seeking this fulfillment. The interesting perspective that Lao Tzu gives is that the master does not seek that fulfillment. In fact, that when you say the master, someone who's mastered themselves, mastered the world around them to some, not that they are the master and the world is their slave, but that they no longer feel the need for self-help. Right? They don't seek the fulfillment of what the answers to why they're going through whatever they're going through. Sometimes those answers can be easier to comprehend, and sometimes it's a causal chain of events that has nothing to do with you, that just happen to touch your world, right? So we can't be so self-centered to think that all answers lie in something that has anything to do with me or ourselves, right? So first of all, I think one of the problems with the whole self-help movement is that we need to look outside of ourselves first anyway. And the irony is, when we start doing that, then we will not need to seek the fulfillment of our own to help ourselves. Now, there may be some deficiencies, something that we wish were different. Well, in that case, we could seek to do better, right? And seek to, for instance, okay, let's look at this. There's a difference between knowing that you seek to improve and seeking the fulfillment of that deficiency. Does that make sense? Seeking the fulfillment of the deficiency versus acknowledging that there's a deficiency and working to improve upon it. One is obsessed with the deficiency itself and alleviating the deficiency. One is a recognition of the deficiency and a sort of a ownership of the deficiency, if that makes any sense. Hopefully I'm explaining. I'm probably not articulating this well. So one way to think about it is when we say the master does not seek fulfillment, the master recognizes the potential in what is not fulfilled, right? So let's say you have this thing you want to do better at. So therefore you have or there's something in your personal life that's missing and you seek to fulfill that thing, right? Then you get caught on this path of how do you fulfill that? And if someone says, I can help you fulfill this thing that's missing, then you can be subject to that manipulation because you'll say, okay, I'll do anything to fulfill this missing component. The master would look at the missing component and say, there is something missing. In some ways, I rejoice in the potential of filling that missing space, if that makes sense. So instead of seeking the fulfillment, you are not reveling, but you are appreciative of the potential of the emptiness. And then you'll work towards changing the emptiness to fulfillment, but the focus isn't on the fulfillment, if that makes sense. Right. So anyway, I've been yapping along. We've got some folks jumping in. Thank you to the folks on the chat. Got some interaction going on here. So Michael W says basically that's what Proverbs is as well. Oh, self-help book. Okay, very good. Dale Lynn, hey, what's up, superfan Dale, jumping in? But everybody's got to eat. Indeed, everybody's got to eat. Michael W, my example is my own, but I eventually found that the more I help other people, the better I felt. Anything else left me feeling empty. Okay. Yes, indeed. Superfan Chris, absolutely agree. Serving others brings fulfillment. Yes. So, yeah, service to others for sure. I think, I believe, and I think the anthropological studies and the fossil record, if you want to even use that, archaeological records, would agree that humans are a social species, that we live in packs or groups, and that we aren't islands just on our own. Looks like we got a comment on YouTube, or excuse me, on Facebook. By the way, Facebook folks, the live chat on Facebook does not work very well for me. So if you want to jump into the conversation, I would use the YouTube link that's in the description. Jump onto YouTube, join the fun. There is a, what's it called? It's a lot easier to see your live chat stuff on YouTube. What was I going to say? Yeah, so of course, helping other people, I think that there is a genetic component to that you feel good in helping other people. Now, does that mean that will alleviate all of what you may need help with? Right? I think some of that too, I think a lot of our issues that we look to ourselves to fix are things that actually could be built up or could be fulfilled by fellowship, right? one of the reasons why I think that we need these self-help guides is because it's not our default state, right? So that's something else to think about too, is everybody has a different default state. There might be some amazing accomplished people out there that have done some amazing things, but what is their default state? Some people would wake up in the morning, and if there was no other pressure on them or nothing, they had nothing, there was no other care or anything, and they didn't have to use motivation for anything. They might wake up in the morning and smoke a blunt and watch YouTube videos all day, or go fishing, or go do just nonsense things all day. And that might be their default state. And in order to do more than the default state, it takes motivation and work. And that might be something that you have to think about as well, is there might be some amazing, awesome people who've done amazing, awesome things. What is their default state? Is their default state to just basically waste their life away? Or are they motivated by something else that gets them to do something that's different than, let's say, if you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish, is it because of your default state, or is it because of external circumstances? And I think sometimes trying to be introspective can be a little tricky, because we obviously have our own biases, right? Our biases, to protect ourselves. And some of that, sometimes we can't even help it. Even if you're trying to be objective, sometimes your brain is just made to protect your own brain. So, sort of weird how that works. The brain protects itself by protects. Well, that becomes another question. Is it protecting itself, or is it protecting something else? Why would the brain need to protect itself from its own production? I don't know. Or is the brain, when it shuts off trauma and makes it so you can't remember what happened? Is it protecting the brain itself that would have housed those memories? And let's say you did remember that. Well, what difference would that make? How would that rack your brain? Or is there something else? Is there another component? Is there a spiritual component or some other component that your brain is protecting by taking action or not taking action, or whatever else it may be at the time? Alan said, "What's up?" Doesn't look like he's on anymore. Maybe he jumped onto YouTube, hopefully. What is up? Looks like we got some folks jumped in. But yeah, so self-help stuff, little tricky to navigate sometimes, but at the same time, very helpful, because I'll tell you this, in my own experience, I've been having some issues back and forth over the last few years. Ever since I left the corporate world, it's been topsy-turvy for me financially. And that financial anxiety can have a very heavy weight, not only emotionally, but physically as well. And so I've started realizing that some of the self-help, like if you look at stuff like Dale Carnegie's how to win friends and something, influence people, or you look at Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, or some of Bob Proctor's work, you'll see that they are leaning on human nature, on things that they see that people do sort of in a default state, either default state, or it's something that's motivated. It's something in you, somewhere in you, right? Already. And they recognize that, and they tell you how to recognize that yourself. And so it's like people people helping each other, really. Again, in a way, it's like distance fellowship. Um, and I think we need that because life can get complex, and sometimes the people around you aren't as complex as life can be, and so you need some additional help. Monique, what's up? Superfan Monique is on the show tonight. Hello. Yes, late to the party, but no worries, no worries at all. What can you do? Yes, so thanks for joining. Doesn't matter if you're late, and plus, well, only just because we missed out on some of your commentary, but you can always catch the beginning on the archives if you like. We're talking about self-help, and why is it around? Is it work? Does it work? What's up with the charlatans out there? How do you watch out for those charlatans? Are there ways that we can help each other through things? Um, and maybe there's a way to fulfill these deficiencies without seeking help through these or being duped by these charlatans. All right, Michael W says it doesn't help that we actually know very little about the human mind or consciousness in general. We're all wading through a mystery. Oh yeah, indeed. That mean, of course, we're learning more and more as time goes by, and etc. But also, some of that may or may not be even relevant at all. And here's the other part: how different are people? So on one hand, you can sort of sum up some similarities in people. There's some generalities in people, in the human being as a person. I mean, excuse me, as an organism. But people are so diverse that how can you really sum up behaviors, motivations, all of these things in any one text or reference or something? And so, I mean, and plus, here's the other thing: it's a journey anyway. You're never going to fully get it right. You know what I mean? It's like, and going back to one of Chris's first comments, people seeking fulfillment and answers as to why they're going through whatever they may be going through. And as I said before, some of those things may be linked directly to your actions or previous actions, but some of those things may that happen to you may be part of a causal chain of events, a set of causes that happen. One thing led to another thing, and then that led to this thing that we're complaining about right now. And it may have nothing to do with you, except for the very point in which it now has something to do with you. So why bother trying to seek the explanation? And even if you did get the explanation, if you found out it had nothing to do with you and it was out of your control, what would it do then? Would you have a special satisfaction? Or if it was in your control, what will it do? You can't go back and change it. So unless you just learned a lesson for the future, I mean, that's always good. Let's study the issue and try to learn something for the future all day. Let's do that. But sometimes seeking the reason why doesn't always get us, or I guess the reason why isn't always relevant, right? Like, I don't know, let's say you're driving down the street and you get sideswiped, and you're driving down the street, you have the right of way, everything like that, and then something happens out of nowhere. Someone could say you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, but you're on the road going the right direction, abiding by traffic rules. You are in the right place at the right time. Someone else did something wrong, and there may not be an explanation for that, I don't think. And you can find the causal chain of events that led to that, but what's that going to do for you? Now, maybe, if it's a drunk driver or something, now we're going to change drunk driver laws. Okay, that makes sense, right? Something like that. But as far as trying to justify as you, or the act, the not action, but the event with yourself as the fulcrum or the focal point of discussion, is the wrong way to go. I think that's the wrong way to go. Some people even go as far as thinking that the negative thoughts in their mind brought it upon them that this happened. In fact, I knew a guy who was very frustrating to talk to. He was saying things like cancer and other diseases are brought on by the mind and negative thought, and that it is very simple and easy for you to explain it away that it was because of the negative thoughts or feelings or actions or something like that. More metaphysical things, that's why you are succumbing to this, disease, etc. So it's I don't know. It's definitely something where you can't just come at it with a big hammer and try to fix it with just one tool in one way. I think there's a lot of different things that are going on, and people are very different. Okay, so Dale says cognitive psychology is real. Indeed, it is real. But here's the other thing. Psychology in general is, again, if we look at human beings, there are some general tendencies here and there, but even those tendencies can be misinterpreted. And honestly, I mean, can we fully trust the apparatus that is trying to tell us about these things? The fact that research is so complex now that primary access to said research is pretty much non-existent. So even if you were to try to peer review something that was published, how are you going to do it? And if no one's funding it, no one's funding the peer review, who's doing it, right? So if someone's funding the research, quote unquote research, and it pops out of the research womb that something is one way or another, if the peer review doesn't have the same funding, will it even exist, right? And since again, going back to primary research, in many situations, the equipment, the people, the time, all of these things are not available to the general population. So how can you validate or verify that, in fact, this is real when people who are supposed to be peer reviewing these things can't even do that sometimes, especially if it's a funding issue? Right. So because really, at the end of the day, profit funds our research now and publications now, as opposed to actual promulgation of knowledge or the promotion of knowledge. Right. I think we can agree to that. Maybe, but maybe not. Okay. So Dale says, yes, the brain is a bag of cats, but with cognitive behavioral therapy. But cognitive behavior has had some real benefits for friends of mine. Personally, a big Carl Jung fan myself, was not happy that my son's psychology textbook barely mentioned him. Dale says PTSD can be beneficial. Did Carl Jung say that that PTSD can be beneficial? Cognitive behavioral therapy has helped friends deal with PTSD, even if we don't know how. It is easy to be obsessed with. It's such a mystery. Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's so much going on that one of the problems is we again we don't think in the 50 shades of gray, right? It doesn't matter what the title of different books are or whatever. We don't look at, a lot of times humans don't like to look at a spectrum of possibility. They want to be either this or that, period. It's a binary decision. And so that's where things can become problematic. PTSD is different. I mean, kids that get beat by their parents have PTSD, right? Kids that grow up in the hood that saw their friends get shot or whatever else, they have PTSD, right? Who's helping them, by the way? Poor kids that are dealing with a lot of craziness in their neighborhoods and crazy stuff going on. Who's helping them? Is there any kind of quarter given to people who have gone through massive trauma, right? PTSD, we talk about it a lot because the military veterans have made have ever since war has been war, have returned back to quote unquote civil society different, right? Um, and we recognize that because there's a marked change in that person. But what if someone grew up within that? Would the same amount of care or concern be levied towards them? So those are some questions I think we should ask. I mean, we speak so openly and what's it called? So surely about certain things like PTSD, for instance, and the effects of PTSD and the need for help. But we look at it. I think we, as a society, look at it very selectively for a very select group of people, as opposed to looking at it in a broad sense and creating this notion that if it applies to if a certain group of people can be affected by it, then why wouldn't another group of people be affected by things in a certain way, right? Anyway, just some things to think about. Michael W. Brain imaging is opening some important doors. In fact, yes, it is. In fact, the idea that, or the brain imaging that shows how different psychopaths think versus non-psychopaths. That psychopathy actually originates in a physical component in the brain, right? That you can literally, through brain waves, determine this type of what do you call it? I don't know, the condition. Michael W. No doctors would even begin to diagnose you without looking at what the issue is. They do x-rays, etc. Only very recently, however, have people's brains been scanned before treatment. Yes, indeed. Living on the street causes PTSD for real. Yes, indeed. I agree with you 100%, Dale. Yeah, what is it? Yes, a doctor wouldn't begin to diagnose you without looking at, sure, of course, a doctor should not diagnose you without looking at the issue. But something that us talking about the physical component of the brain and being able to image your brain and during your thoughts and emotional what's it called, reactions to things. It reminds me of back in high school when I sort of really started questioning the notion of spirituality and whether or not there is even something non-physical about us at all, right? So if we talk about so we see that something as sort of somewhat complex as psychopathy, being a psychopath, can be physically read or viewed through instrumentation. There's a story of Phineas Gage, a guy who had a railroad spike shot through his head as an accident, but it shot through like the frontal cortex or something. Which isn't necessarily, I mean, that's something that is important to humans for higher thought and memory and some other things. But that area of the brain is not as necessary as, say, something like the amygdala or some other components of your brain that handle your your natural life processes. So what the guy survives, and he is completely different. His memories are different, emotions different, everything that makes him who he was, who Phineas Gage was different. If you take psychoactive drugs, the world that you see is different, and the way you react to it is different. If you take other drugs, it will change. It can change your mood, your feelings about things. What is it? So you start begging the question: what is it that defines or differentiates humans from anything else? And if you can jiggle around someone's brain and make them into a different person, or feed them chemicals and turn them into a different person in their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, everything that you would define that unique human by is now different. And that is all different by creating a new physical situation, either by chemical or physical manipulation of the brain. You have fundamentally changed this person as a human. So what about you isn't physical? If your thoughts, your memories, everything intangible, anything, all of those things, even your feelings about God, there's literally a place in your brain that when people think about God and the feeling of God and all of the religious kind of feelings about that kind of stuff, there's a place. Hey, they've been doing brain scans. There's a place in your brain that resides. If you jiggle that around, guess what? You won't feel the feeling of God anymore. So if that's the case, if all of these physical things can change what seems so ethereal and non-physical, intangible, then does that even exist at all? Right. So something to think about. Michael W. Says, the question remains whether the brain is where consciousness derives from, or whether the brain is more like an amazing filter or radio, if you will. Oh, yes. There's been discussion of consciousness being like a radio wave almost that we tune in, possibly at the nano, what is it? What's the word? At the quantum physics level. That's a possibility. There's a lot of things out there. So there's a chance that you could be jiggling around the radio, and the radio can no longer broadcast the same. Or maybe, and it also, by the way, if that's the case, then how do we know that consciousness isn't simply, if it is like a radio, then how do we know it's even unique to you? Maybe it's like a frequency that's coming out that's always the same, and your brain is what transforms it into something else. Or maybe there is no external consciousness, and that it is all 100% generated in your brain through chemicals, electrical impulses, and the physical realm, 100%. And that anything else that we feel is basically side effect, is a residual of the complexities of what has become of this thing, this growth that happened in this organism that evolved over time. And now it becomes sort of this self-feeding, like a what's the word I'm looking for? Dang it. It's like a self-perpetuating situation. The more, well, it could be a self-perpetuating situation. And in some ways it is a self-perpetuating situation for our minds to be as developed and complex as they are, for them to continue to develop and become complex. However, our society may have the ultimate say in that, because let's face it, It takes a village to have a village, and if you can't keep people, smart enough or developed enough to keep the society alive, then eventually it'll fall apart, right? All right. So Michael says it's the level of self-awareness and metacognition that sets us apart. It's the I am that is the foundational component, right? But that is the thing, is that the I am, I think you can argue that the I am part of the human experience, if you took the right piece of metal and jiggled the right molecules or cells of the brain and sort of the right neurotransmitters, that awareness could be gone, right? And if that's the case, then is there anything spiritual about being human, or is it just as physical as being any other animal, right? Does or like even this, does a dog have what level of consciousness does the dog have? I am, right? Probably not. So if you took that away from a human, would they still be human, right? Michael W. says, yes, there are quite a few findings in quantum physics that point to consciousness is fundamental to the universe itself. Perhaps. Michael W. says, as not is. Double slit experiment and all that, wave function collapse. If you're familiar with that concept, sorry, I'm blowing up the thread. Yeah, so I mean, of course, you have your uncertainty and the idea that even your observations manipulate, or even observing something potentially manipulates the thing that you're observing. Those kinds of things. That's all potential too. At the end of the day, though, we all live in a physical, material reality, right? So whatever the theories are of whatever it is that might be happening, we can try to get down to the nitty-gritty of it. But in physical, material reality, in the observable universe, these things all point to some inconsistencies, or at least inconsistencies with what society and at large sort of claims about us, about the human experience, about all of these things. And I think going back to the original topic, self-help, why is it that there's such a $9 billion on the low end? What is going on? And we are a complex organism, and we are a social being, and our society is becoming less and less social. And I think that's showing itself in a lot of the issues that we're seeing individually, but also in the movements of like the self-help movement and those kinds of things as well. But I will tell you that it's been a great show so far tonight. Be sure to like and subscribe. And by the way, Michael, I love this shit too. So if you have if you want to blow up the thread about a different topic or whatever topic you want, just let me know. Put it in the comments, or I don't know, come up with something, hit me up. Again, like, subscribe, those kinds of things help out the channel. And by the way, tell your friends, spread the word, try to get, drop the link on some forums or whatever, do some guerrilla marketing, spam it out to your friends, especially people that want to get into an argument. Let's get into a heated debate. You guys don't want to hear me just yap forever about some opinions that I've got. Let's bring on some folks that might disagree with some of our points and have some pretty intense conflict. Not only will that be entertaining, but I think the best lessons we're going to learn are going to be from that type of dialogue, to where it gets intense. It's a little bit heated. Some emotions might flow around, but that is what's going to sort of solidify in our minds what it is that we're talking about and sort of the main points. And we always get into some deep combos and stuff. So this is what the whole show's about. So if you want to get into a deep combo about something, hit me up, give me a topic. That's sometimes the hardest part of the show, is trying to figure out what the hell to talk about. So send me something that's on your mind, and we'll do a little deep dive into it and get yapping. All right, Michael W said, I'm not done with the God stuff. What do you got? Well, what other last points do you got about the God stuff? Dale Lynn says, maybe some night I'll call you and we can argue. Please, by the way, Dale, you could always get on Skype. There's a Skype link. I think I do have a call-in number now. Next time I will put that call-in number in. Do a whole show on that. So wait, do a whole show on what, Michael W? Let's pick each other's position and argue them. Well, I actually did that before in what was it? It was it was an intro to philosophy class. It was called Contemporary Moral Issues. One of the best classes I've ever taken. Socratic method. I'm not super well versed in the intricacies of the Socratic method, but we could go over that. Theology. I'm not super well versed on theology. In fact, I am the opposite. I really don't give it much regard. In fact, so I'm afraid. Well, we could talk about theology if you want. I'm not going to be able to deep dive into it, other than to basically poo-poo the whole thing in general. But we could talk about sort of the existence therein and motivations as to why religion is so important. I'll leave you with this one other nugget, I guess. In all this talk that we've gone sort of back and forth about what is the nature of humans, or what is, human nature. And I've mentioned this a few times before. A lot of people think humans are self-centered or self-serving and individualistic, and they will seek to conquer, and that's human nature. And I caution you on accepting that premise, because again, we talk about how humans are a cooperative organism, a group and societal organism, and adapted therein to be that. So, we have to also be very cautious about what attributes of human behavior we try to paint across the grand swath of humanity, as opposed to specific people who find themselves in leadership positions. Because if you know this or not, there have been studies that show that there is a high prevalence or a high correlation between positions of power and psychopathy. So people who seek these positions of power and often get the positions of power are also psychopaths. So if we define the actions taken by leadership that other people follow, because that is something I think we can say about humans very positively as social animals that we are, or social organisms that we are, natural followers. I know everybody gets all in a bunch and they feel like, oh my God, no, that's not me. I'm a natural leader. At the end of the day, you're listening to someone. You're not just telling people how the world's going to work and guiding them to change that. Almost every one of us is a follower, because that's how we get society to work in its way. Now, within our own realms, in our context, we become leaders. Some of us aren't really natural at it. We get put in leadership position and we fail at it. That doesn't mean anything. Everyone thinks that they can all fight to be the leader. And it's like some people are better at being leaders than others, and some people are better at being doctors than others, or being painters, or basketball players, or this. And you could still be a leader within that context, but it doesn't mean everybody is good at being a leader. So anyway, we have to be very cautious about how we define humanity, human nature, all of these things. All right, yes, theology. So we could talk about theology. If you want to talk about that, we can talk about that the whole time. Michael W. says we need to talk about the contemplative strain of each religion, because strip away the garbage, and they are very similar and have a lot to say to the topic of your show tonight. They could, indeed, they could. And I say strip away all of it, and you don't have to deal with theology really at all. I mean, we could look at the core premises instead of having. Let's just look at the core issues that will benefit us or improve. So do that help or whatever it is we're looking for. Let's talk about instead, because here, in order to identify them in texts, theological texts, right? In order to identify them, then you already have to know them. If you already know them, then let's just talk about them instead of trying to dig around in Hindu texts and see if it coincides with Christian texts, which coincides with Greek mythology, which coincides with, like, what difference does it make? Who cares? Who cares? We already identified the key item, right? So why do we need to find it in a bunch of stories? Right? Let's just stick to the key items and study those, right? Instead of patting the ancients on their back. Oh, hey, great job, Zeus, for having this attribute that, or good job, Hermes, for being associated with this attribute. Greeks thought of this, right? So I think, anyway, we could deep dive into that. I don't even want to start it's a whole other talk. But we could talk about some of these things. Dale Lynn says psychopathy is a description, not a prescription. Indeed, psychopathy is a description, not a prescription. So if you're a psychopath and you have physical attributes of being a psychopath, and you make it, and there's a high prevalence of psychopaths that have a physical description of being a psychopath because their brain waves work in that way, and leadership positions are filled with them, it doesn't take away from the fact that they're psychopaths, right? It's something that happens in physical reality, so we should also recognize that reality, right? Michael W. says the contemplative strain is not about written texts. Okay, indeed, or ritual or dogma. Very well. I think, though, I have a feeling, and perhaps we could talk about this on the next show when we talk about the contemplative strain. Again, that contemplative strain is something that you can identify probably in those religions, right? So why don't we just talk about that strain without the religion, right? Are we using the religion to validate that? Maybe you need to explain that in more detail. All right, so Michael W. says it's about experience at the deepest heights of the human mind itself, what Jung called the collective unconsciousness. Interesting. That's for another day. Yes, I would like to get into that a little bit more and see, especially this idea of the collective unconsciousness. So if he felt very strongly about the collective unconsciousness, I should only assume, which is not a good thing to do, assume that he believed in a collective consciousness. So that would be a very interesting topic for sure. All right, so looks like we have one person on Facebook, by the way. Next Tuesday will be the next show, and you should tune in on the YouTube channel because Facebook is not doing it right. Very glitchy. All right, so this is the real end of the show. Thank you all for all your great comments, and bring some people on. Michael W., we will talk about, what's it called? We will talk about the collective unconsciousness and theology, the contemplative strain that you're discussing. But I will what is it? That is a deal if you can try to bring some extra folks along who either agree or disagree with what we're talking about. So yes, again, thank you all for tuning in, and you are left with Calm, another Sep Rock track. And let me start this from the top as we head out for another Tuesday. All right, y'all. Until next time, peace out.
Como eu sou, como eu sou, como eu sou, como eu sou. Sei que falo. Como eu sou infeliz,